You cut open an animal with a stone blade. Blood dries beneath your nails. Minutes later, you tear cooked meat with the same fingers and place a piece into a child's hand. No soap, no sink, no idea that invisible life may be moving from skin to food. So why did this not kill everyone? Here is the twist. Ancient humans probably cleaned their hands more often than the stereotype suggests. They rinsed them, wiped them on grass or hides, and may have rubbed away grease with sand, ash, or plant material. But that was not modern hand washing. They were fighting dirt they could see, not microbes they could not. The honest answer begins with a problem. Hand washing does not fossilize. Archaeologists can recover stone tools, hearths, bones, seeds, and even ancient feces. They usually cannot recover the moment someone knelt beside a stream, rubbed their palms together, and returned to camp. So we cannot know how often Paleolithic people washed their hands. We can only reconstruct what made sense in their world. And in that world, clean hands did not mean what clean hands mean to you. Today, you wash at specific moments, after using the toilet, before preparing food, after touching raw meat, or before caring for a wound. The routine works because you understand a hidden chain. Something too small to see can move from one surface to another and enter the body. Ancient humans had no microscopes and no germ theory. A hand could look clean, smell normal, and still carry bacteria, viruses, or parasite eggs. Without the idea of invisible transmission, there was little reason to perform the same careful ritual at the same critical moments every day. That does not mean your ancestors were blind to disease. Human disgust is ancient. Rotting meat, feces, pus, foul water, and the smell of decay trigger avoidance because these cues often signal danger. Long before science, the body already had a rough alarm system. But disgust is not a microscope. It warns you about obvious contamination. It may not warn you about a clean-looking hand that touched raw organs, a clear pool contaminated upstream, or food handled by someone who seemed perfectly healthy. Imagine finishing a butchery task. Your fingers are slick with fat. You scrape them against dry grass, wipe them on an animal hide, then rinse in a shallow stream. The hand feels better, the smell is weaker. The visible dirt is gone. From your point of view, the job is finished. Even plain water and friction can remove some material from skin. Sand or ash may help cut through grease. Yet these methods are inconsistent, and the evidence for prehistoric use is indirect. They could clean a hand without creating the reliable, repeated barrier that soap and modern technique provide. Water also had a price. It had to be found, reached, carried, guarded, or melted. In a dry season, drinking came first, cooking came next. Washing hands with several rounds of clean water could feel wasteful when every container had been filled by human effort. In freezing weather, the cost was different. Wet hands lost heat, cracked skin hurt. A person handling stone, wood, sinew, and fire could not always stop to wash repeatedly in icy water, especially when the danger of cold was immediate and the danger of microbes was invisible. Soap was another missing piece. Soap works because its molecules surround grease and help lift dirt and microbes from skin so water can carry them away. People eventually learned to make soap-like substances from fats and alkaline ashes. But standardized soap was not an ordinary Paleolithic camp tool. A greasy hand might be rubbed with ash from the hearth. That could sometimes help. But ash could also contain dirt, sharp particles, or contamination. It was not a measured product, and no one was timing a 20-second scrub between the fingers and beneath the nails. There was also no faucet. Rinsing in a shared bowl or still pool could remove grime and then return contamination to the skin. Clean running water is useful partly because what is lifted away keeps moving away. Ancient peoples sometimes had streams, but not every camp did. The structure of ancient life. For most of human prehistory, people lived in small, mobile groups. A disease that needed a large chain of new hosts could burn out more easily than it would in a dense town. There were fewer strangers, fewer crowded rooms, and no packed city of thousands. This did not make small groups disease-free. They still faced infected wounds, foodborne illness, parasites, animal diseases, respiratory infections, and contaminated water. But the pressure to invent formal hand-washing rules may have been weaker when many major epidemics could not sustain themselves. The archaeological record shows that invisible enemies were present. At Durrington Walls, near Stonehenge, Researchers examined preserved feces from around 2500 BCE. Several samples contained parasite eggs, revealing exposure linked to food and animals during large seasonal gatherings. Those parasite eggs do not prove that someone failed to wash after using the toilet. Some came from eating infected organs or undercooked food. That they reveal the larger truth: hands, tools, animals, waste, and meals were connected by roots ancient people could not fully see. At Çatalhöyük in central Anatolia, an early farming settlement occupied between roughly 7,100 and 6,150 BCE, researchers identified whipworm eggs in human feces. Whipworm spreads through microscopic eggs associated with fecal contamination. A settlement made those invisible roots easier to repeat. Farming changed the hygiene problem. More people stayed in one place, waste accumulated. Animals lived closer to humans, floors, food areas, refuse piles, and water sources could remain connected for years. The old strategy of simply moving away from a dirty camp became less available. At Must Farm in Bronze Age Britain, preserved human and dog feces contained several kinds of parasite eggs. Again, this was not a simple measurement of hand washing. It was a snapshot of how food, water, animals, and waste could circulate through a community. These sites are much later than the deepest Paleolithic past, but they preserve what earlier camps usually cannot. They show that ancient bodies lived inside a web of contamination. The web existed before anyone understood its threads. So why did ancient humans not build a hand-washing station beside every hearth? Because a good hygiene habit requires more than intelligence. It requires materials, water, a theory of danger, repeated social teaching, and agreement about the moments when cleaning matters most. Think about a child in camp. The child copies adults. If everyone wipes greasy fingers after butchery, that habit spreads. If people avoid foul water, that habit spreads. But if no one connects an invisible illness 3 days later with a clean-looking hand today, a stricter ritual has no obvious lesson to teach. Ancient knowledge was built from visible cause and effect. Touch fire, feel pain, eat rotten meat, become sick. Drink from a foul pool, regret it, but microbial transmission is delayed, inconsistent, and confusing. 5 people may share a meal, yet only to become ill. That uncertainty hides the pattern. The person who washed may still become sick. The person who did not wash may remain healthy. Without controlled experiments, the lesson is nosy. A useful habit can look pointless, while a dangerous habit can appear safe for years. The counterintuitive part is that mobile hunter-gatherers were not necessarily living inside permanent filth. Small camps could separate sleeping places, hearths, animal processing, and waste. People could leave contaminated ground behind. Movement itself sometimes acted like sanitation. Permanent settlements created a harder problem. Once humans crowded together, stored food, kept animals nearby, and reused the same spaces, contamination could build faster than old instincts could manage. Civilization did not simply make people cleaner. In many places, it made hygiene more necessary, and even after cities appeared, routine hand-washing was far from automatic. Baths, perfumes, clean clothing, and ritual washing could exist without an understanding of microbes. A person could value cleanliness deeply and still miss the exact moments when hands spread disease. That distinction matters. Cleanliness is what feels, looks, or smells clean. Hygiene is a strategy designed to interrupt transmission. Ancient humans had many forms of cleanliness. What they lacked was the scientific map connecting hands to invisible organisms and invisible organisms to later illness. Modern hand-washing feels obvious only because generations of observation, experiments, public health campaigns, plumbing, and cheap soap made it obvious. Remove those supports, and the habit becomes harder. Even today, people skip washing when water is distant, soap is missing, or the risk feels abstract. So the question is not why your ancestors were careless. The better question is how humans eventually learned to defend themselves against something no eye could see. The answer required more than a cleaner hand. It required a new way of imagining the world. Return to that first scene. Blood beneath your nails, food in your fingers. A child waiting beside the fire. You would wash because you know what may be there. Your ancestor might wipe, rinse, and continue because everything dangerous seemed to be gone. The difference was not intelligence, it was invisible knowledge. If you enjoyed this journey into the distant past, subscribe for more stories about ancient humans and human evolution.